She cannot live up to the hype.
No way. Okay, so what I want to do, and it's as much for me as it is for some of the other people in this room, I want to just really quickly go around the room and have you say who you are, and if you're affiliated with a school or the city or whatever, just say that really quickly, because I want to get a handle on exactly who's in the room, because I think I can better answer questions as we go along if I get it. So I'm going to start over there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lucas Phelan. I'm here with the Zootown Arts Community Center.
Hi, I'm Hatton Littman with Missoula County Public Schools.
I'm Russ Fletcher with Montana Associated Technology Roundtable.
Jane Kelly, Office of Neighborhood, City of Missoula.
Michael Bader, MCAT
Ann Hughes, Missoula County.
Bruce Tribency, I'm the City MCAT Commission.
Elaine Dawson, retired, working with arts and disability.
Honora Bray, Missoula Public Library Director.
Jesse Rogers, Historical Museum at Fort Missoula.
Jennifer Sauer, University of Montana.
Jenny Merriam, City of Missoula.
Lisa Mecklenburg-Jackson, Missoula Community Access Television Commission.
Kay Rabel, President of Missoula Community Access.
The late Susan Hay Patrick with United Way Missoula County, sorry.
Stacy Anderson, City Council Ward 5.
Do you guys want to sit up front? It's not scared.
What happened when you're
Gary Matson, a former member of the Bonner Milltown Community Council.
Judy Maxon, also a Bonner resident and citizen.
Nancy Leifer, I'm with the Missoula League of Women Voters.
Great.
C.B. Pearson, I was a former chair of MCAT and can say that I was around when we fought to get MCAT set up, and now I'm the Montana Director for M&R Strategic Services.
I'm Tyler Gruch, I'm a MCAT board member.
Jordan Lyons, MCAT Board.
I'm Kelly McGuire with Missoula City County Relationship Violence Services.
I'm Michelle Hand. I did a documentary with MCAT Resources about 10 or 12 years ago, and I'm a business consultant with financial management services using the internet, and I consult to local government entities. Ritchie, Rexford, Keevan, Dodson, Circle, I don't know, I can't even name all the little towns that I have to work with over the internet.
John Hancock, I'm a retired cable TV researcher who had a 7-year stint in the industry. Sort of what came on board.
Okay. I'm Megan Robson, and I work with the City of Texas.
I am ASAP Adonai. I am the host of ASAP Cafe and one of the producers for the Missoula's Community Media Resource.
Chris Badgley, MCAT.
And I'm Heather Harp, City Councilwoman Ward 3.
And you were
Michael Kuzlage, I'm with Missoula Community Radio.
fantastic. Well, as Joel indicated, one of the things we want to try to accomplish this afternoon is to give you some information about what the opportunities are when this happens. And the franchise that's expiring now was written in 2003. Think about how much media and how you use media has changed since 2003. This contract that will be renewed, or franchise as we call them, will probably be at least 10 years. So with this franchise, the current one ending this year, at the end of the year, the new one, if it's 10 years, will take us out to 2028. And if it's 15, well, I don't even need to say the number. My point simply is that the process is an important process because you have an entity, a business entity, who is using public property, the easements on the poles and underground, that's public property, and the city's responsibility is to take care of that and to give people access to that. And to charge a rent for the use of it as appropriate, and federal law and state law permits local governments to say to the cable operator, particularly in a case like this, because essentially there's no other wireline provider of video, voice, and data, okay? We can negotiate for rent. And that's things for our public, things for our community for the use of this right-of-way. So a very important part of the renewal process is, and what really legally drives it, is that single factor. So I'm going to try to give you some background on how that works. I'm not going to get too deep into the legal part of it. I'm happy to answer questions. I want to tell you about the opportunities. And I want to tell you how you guys can be involved and how your circle of friends and people you're involved with can help out to help the city of Missoula and MCAT come out the other end of this negotiation with charter, with a franchise that really can represent not only the needs today of this community, but the needs in 10 years. And that's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do, because you really need to think about what are the big issues facing this community today, and what are the big issues that the city's going to face in 5 years or 10 years. Some of you who all work in different fields, you kind of know what issues are in your arena. And that's why the diversity of participation in this process is so critical. So we're going to give you some cable basics. We're going to answer your questions and tell you how you can get involved. Before I go on, though, what questions do you come to the room with today? And that probably be a logical place to start. Is there something that you sit in this room going, what are some thoughts that come to your mind about this process? Or are you thinking, I don't really know that much about it? Yeah, go for it.
Is charter expressed any feelings about going ahead with any kind of a franchise? Is there any kind of welcoming or the opposite to this process and what charter might like to be engaged with?
Well, charter is here already. Okay, I'm not sure. I think I understand your question. Under law, if they want their current agreement, if they want a renewed contract for another 10 or 15 years, they have to come to the city and say, I want my franchise renewed, which they did, okay? And they did that probably close to 2 years ago, because under federal law, they have a 3-year window in advance they have to ask, okay? So charter said, hey, I want my franchise renewed. So we know for sure they're ready to engage, they want a new contract, and obviously the reason they want a new contract is because they, as business people, they can generate a lot of money, okay, by having their wires in the conduits, their wires on the poles, and selling services to the public, okay? Other questions? Yeah?
Well, almost as a follow-up to him, now that the cat's out of the bag that they have put in to get it renewed, is there anything on the table that they found objectionable in the last franchise agreement that they're trying to get rid of, or on the opposite end, are there some things they really, really like that they hope to keep?
Well, that's where we're just starting. We're just starting the process. So the question is are there things that charter doesn't like in the current franchise, or are there things that they want to keep, or are there things they want in the new one? That conversation hasn't started yet. This process that we're in right now, which the city is really starting, is the beginning of that conversation that you're talking about. And if you look in the kit, and I'm going to pull this, have you kind of draw this out now. I'll be hitting it in a little bit more detail later. If you look at this sort of green sheet, that's actually the Cliff Note version of the federal franchise renewal process that cities and cable companies have to go through. And I will, I'm going to hit more detail around that in a little bit, but I wanted to draw to your attention also the PowerPoint that we put the PowerPoint in your kit just because if there are things that you hear that you want to remember, it gives you something to jot your notes down on so you can walk out of here with some remembrance of what's happening. Other questions? That was a great one. Yeah? Yes?
Can another cable company come in at this point and bid on a contract instead?
Okay, so the question is, can another cable company come in and bid? Yes. Under federal law, second bullet, franchises by law are non-exclusive. There is absolutely nothing that prevents a second company to come in. In reality, because of the cost of constructing what we call the plant, the wires, the logical second company is always going to be your local telephone company because they already have wires on the poles. They don't have to build anything, okay? They may have to upgrade what they have, but in most cases, if an incumbent telephone company hasn't come in at the point in time we are right now, given a lot of things that have happened over the last 45 years or so with cable, kind of unlikely. I mean, CenturyLink, and some of you know about the company CenturyLink, okay? They actually, about 4 years ago, commenced a process as a phone company of starting to get into the cable business. And they went into some of the cities in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and in Washington State, a few places, but then they stopped doing it, okay? So, it answers your question. Now, in a few communities, in the past, the city has actually decided they're going to own and operate a cable system. And so you have municipally owned cable systems. There's only about 300 and some of them around the country. They're most commonly found in cities that own their own public power system, okay? For a lot of reasons which I won't dive into. Yes, ma'am?
I have two questions, one to follow up on what you just said.
Uh-huh.
Do the same federal regulations for telcos with incumbent providers and competitive providers apply to wireline service? So that whomever is the incumbent provider is forced to lease at a wholesale rate the wire lines to competitive providers?
Okay. I'm going to come at, the question is, and I think I'm understanding your question, does an incumbent cable operator or telephone company have to lease their wires to another entity? The answer to the question is yes. Now, cable operates under Title VI, which is one part of federal law, and telephone companies operate under Title II, which is common carrier law. I will stop there. But, so yes, they have to lease to each other, but the issue is how they're using it. Because under Title VI, that's for a cable franchise. That's dealing with the cable services, the video services provided. But a cable company, as you all well know, also offers internet and telephone. Okay. Other questions? These are great questions, by the way. I think it starts to open this up. Yeah.
Well, on the green sheet on step 6, I haven't seen anything in the packet that gives me an idea of the time frame to get to an RFP. So between now and when?
All right. Once the needs assessment is completed, okay, then is the time to issue the RFP, because you have built what the needs assessment is. And if you look at your sheet there, okay.
I saw there's meetings in April.
Yeah. So what that public input does is create the legal foundation upon which the city will then put things in the RFP that says, these are things we can require, these are things we want but we can't require. Cable company respond. So I'm dealing and chatting with the gentleman who's the attorney that the city has retained to do the negotiations. My guess is that we're looking at probably, and don't hold me on this, but I think I have a fairly good idea of when Brian would want to do this. It's probably going to be in the vicinity of probably May or early June. Now that's my guess. Now, an important thing to remember, the current franchise expires in December of this year. But it's pretty common for the franchises to get extended a little bit to properly complete the process. Because you don't want to rush it just to think you have to meet that deadline. Because the only persons who are going to get hurt if you rush is the community and the city. Okay? So, but good question. Very good question. Okay, yeah, in the back.
Is there any obligation if they no longer use cable? They don't need wires, they don't need poles, they don't need the right-of-way, they go wireless?
Ultimately, some cable companies are going wireless right now. Okay, but they're not going totally wireless. You have to have a landline fiber backbone to do this stuff. It cannot all be done wirelessly.
Today?
Okay, today.
But in 10 years?
I still think it'll be a big stretch to think that you can do it totally wirelessly without any fiber backbone whatsoever.
Nobody, I mean, not even ISPs are building for total wireless without fiber backbone.
They've got to have fiber backbone to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me tick through some of these things now. The franchise is a contract. It is essentially a sophisticated land use agreement. The cable company is renting public property. The city has the authority to grant access to that property. Okay. Franchises, as we mentioned, non-exclusive. Another company can come in. Nothing in the last 30 years has prevented another company from coming in. What services you're going to get? The ability to enforce the franchise agreement. All of that has to be in the franchise. Because if it's not, the city doesn't have the authority to deal with it. Okay. So that's why this franchise is not a 5 or 10 page document. It's more like a 60 or 70 page document. Okay. It's a very sophisticated, it deals with everything from access to the public right-of-ways to digging in the streets. It deals with funding and resources, the channels you have for access and community media here, the funding for it, the ability to originate live programming from schools and libraries from different places. That's all dictated by what's in the franchise. If it's not in the franchise, the company's not obligated to do it. Okay? Local governments have to abide by federal and state law. That's this crib sheet here I gave you, which is a very, very, very shortened version of what the law is. Franchises today are typically 10 years. The one that's expiring, as I mentioned earlier, was a 15-year franchise, but we typically don't see them longer than 10 years nowadays, okay? So that's another thing to be aware of. Second to the last bullet is one I just want you to put a big black magic marker underneath it. Public input is absolutely critical to what comes out the other end of the renewal process. I've worked in places where I actually haven't worked in places. I've heard about places where they thought, oh, well, let's put like our little committee together and we'll go in and we'll sit in a room with just 5 of us and we'll figure out what we want as a city and then we'll go and we'll sit down with the cable company. Well, by law, if you have not done a public input process, you have not built a legal foundation for what you're negotiating for. The cable operator is going to know that. They're going to know, and therefore in the RFP process, they're going to go, listen, this is just a bunch of people who just hung out and put something together. There was no real broad public input process, which when the legal stuff starts to kick in the negotiations, will be a really downside for a community that tries to do that. That's why Missoula and MCAT working together is so critical to all of this. I saw a hand in the back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious about net neutrality enforcements. Governor of Montana made some statements recently that you can't violate net neutrality if you want to do business with the state. Isn't the opportunity for the cities to include these in franchise contracts pretty good idea if the communities want to?
That's Title II. It's federal law, okay, and it's Title II, not Title VI. Right. So, however, there's a kind, and to me, there's sort of a version of net neutrality to me that makes sure is if we make sure that the cable plant is accessible to everybody in the community, that it goes by every home, okay? That if we make sure, even though cities can't regulate rates, that there is, that the company has a basic service tier that's an affordable tier, okay? That there are resources available to the community to be able to use the cable communication system, like a community media center, like channels, etc. It's not net neutrality from the standpoint of what you're referring to, but it's about making the resources as broadly available as we can under law. And also, again, we can't require the cable, we can't require rates, we can't negotiate rates and regulate rates under federal law. But there are things we can do, customer service sorts of things as well. So it kind of gets us there, but it's not exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So given that federal law hasn't really caught up with what's actually happening, we all know that wireline service and cable providers are actually internet service companies. They're no longer DSL, copper, wire cable companies. So can't we in this franchise agreement though insist that they behave like the internet service providers they are and request the kinds of things we want from them?
What are you thinking of in answer?
So Spectrum has assets in the right-of-way, they're attached poles, whatever, but it's actually fiber assets that deliver high-speed broadband internet.
Yeah.
So in our franchise, can't we insist that our community receive benefits that are beyond cable TV benefits? For example, low cost or free access to shelters, or for families who are considered in transition or homeless or who can't afford the internet, to try and close the digital divide.
You can negotiate for, if it is identified as a community need in the needs assessment process, okay, you can negotiate for complementary connections to those locations, okay. You cannot tell them they can only charge so much. So, you see where see, that's what's so tricky about this, because we're dealing with a wireline service that provides a fiber that provides 3 different services that are overseen under different parts of the law. But if you know how this works well enough, you can find those crossover points. But the crossover points only become valuable to you if they've been identified in the needs assessment process, okay? And that's what I'm going to keep circling back to, why your input when we get to focus groups and online survey is absolutely critical. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so can you just, so on the same point, complementary connection versus, so that's like a free internet at copper all the time, versus us saying you can only charge families that are below poverty line a maximum of $25.
Okay, you
Right?
cannot.
Is that what the difference
you
is?
can, yeah, you can't control. You can't control the rate.
Right, okay. That's
Can't control the rate. That's key. Rates have been deregulated for a
Right.
while. So I want to tell you what's in your current franchise right now. Now, the franchise is expiring. And what I'm going to show you right now is what's at stake. What's in your current franchise that's sort of the public benefits, or what we call the rent for the use of the right-of-way, okay? And as I tell you, and I share this with you, I want you to remember, all of this technically goes away. You have to start from ground zero in a renewal process, okay? So you can't assume, oh, we've got this, so then we're going to negotiate for these other things. You got to first start with, are these things you still want to have, and can you justify them, and then it goes from there. So 15-year franchise expires in December 2018. We estimate there's about 9,100 homes and businesses connected that are taking cable service today in the city, and roughly about 30,000 in the county. There are now, the value of the charter franchise to the community, what the rent is. Number one, you have 2 community channels, okay? But I want you to note that those community channels, unlike the network affiliates in your local PBS channel, are not in HD, okay? This is something you can negotiate for. But they're not going to give it to you, as they haven't in the last 15 years, even though they could have, because they weren't required to do it. Okay? It shows you the importance of the requirement part. There was a one-time capital grant for a whole 15 years of a grand total of a whopping $50,000 for 15 years. Okay? There is in the franchise, there's 25 cents per subscriber per month with a CPI inflator that goes every 2 years. So I think that's up to about maybe 32, 34 cents, something like that right now. All right. There are free cable service drops to a very long list of city, school, and community locations. And that's, I think, at exhibit roughly E of the current franchise agreement. There are 10 locations where there's high-speed modem service to be offered by the cable operator. Yeah, question?
I just want to make sure when you say free cable service, is that equivalent to saying there's a TV drop or there's a service drop?
There's a TV drop. Yes. Okay. Again, these are things in your current franchise, 2003, remember, okay? And there's a franchise fee, and that is at 5% of the gross cable revenues, does not include internet or telephony, okay? And that's capped by federal law. It cannot go above 5%, and it cannot include internet or telephony service. This is the public benefit package that's in your 2003 version of the franchise right now. All of these are on the table. Now, this is part of what the city has at stake in renewal. And I want to show you what charter has at stake in this second. Do you want to dive in?
No, I think it's important that we, when we move forward, realize we didn't negotiate with charter for this.
I know you did with Bresnan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and so you guys know that cable systems, one of the things you deal with in franchise renewal is what happens if a cable operator wants to sell their system to another company, which is exactly what happened here, okay? So you need to have the rules of the road for that process built into the franchise as well. I'm glad you brought it up because it's a good opportunity to throw that out there so y'all are aware of that, okay? So let's take a look at what charter has at stake. Gee, why does charter want their franchise renewed? Okay. So what I've done is a very, very conservative estimate. I took that 9,100 subscribers. I took it by about $104 a subscriber a month, which is really, and that's the amount about 2 years ago the average subscriber was paying just for the cable part. Now I think you guys know this, probably higher now. But I wanted to give you a conservative sense of this. Times 12 months, times 15 years, that's $170 million. And that doesn't count rate increases, and that doesn't count internet, and that doesn't count telephone. Now, if you add conservatively the internet and the telephone in, and the rate increases, now we're up to about $350 million. All right. So, as you can see, charter has a lot at stake to get this franchise renewed. They're going to have a chance to make a bunch of money, all right, and they're going to use your public right-of-way to do it, all right. So, again, rent for the use of the right-of-way. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Nobody says they shouldn't be able to make the money. Sure, that's fine. But they need to provide back to the community to the degree the community wants it by law and can negotiate it for it by law. some kind of something, some kind of something back to the community. All right. So that's what charter has at stake when we're looking at this franchise renewal process. So what can you do? What can we do? What are some of the potential outcomes? I'm not saying these are exactly what this community wants. This is really big picture. Guarantees that the system will be a state-of-the-art system throughout the life of the franchise. Now this is where we get into making sure that fiber goes deeper into the community. You know, it's closer to the home, for example. Where I live in Sacramento, California, my cable operator, and in my town there are 3, okay, happens to take fiber right into my house, okay, which means I have very fast internet, all right, depending on the service I choose to subscribe to. Now, can you require them to do that? No. Can you make sure that they maintain the system at whatever the state of the art is? Yes. So that's something you can do in renewal. Now, writing that language gets tricky, okay? But I won't dive there at this moment because I want to make sure I cover everything and I answer your questions. Assuring quality.
Jesse had a question on the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go for it.
No worries. I'm a Missoula County resident, so I don't work within Missoula City. And I also work on what could be called the outskirts of Missoula City. And so there's 2 questions along the lines of, I noticed the subscribers here are at 9,100, not including the 3,000 from county. So through this negotiation, can it be negotiated to get fiber farther out from the depths of Missoula City? Say working at the Historical Museum, there is no fiber run out there, and so it causes a lot of problems when it comes to having good internet service, cable. You've got Target Range School out there and a lot of other residentials. Same with Bonner and that area where I live. So looking at this, is that a possibility to work on a broader scale than within the strict Missoula City limits?
So the question is, essentially, can the county, the unincorporated county area that's around the city, can they coordinate somehow with the city in the franchise renewal process? Remember, the county would have to have a separate franchise with charter, separate from the city. And it's my understanding right now the county does not have a franchise at all. Okay, now I hope I was told that correctly. Okay, the city council people going, yes, okay. So in answer to your question, yeah, but the county has to enter into a renewal process, and the county, and there's a lot of different ways this can happen. I happen to have worked with a lot of what we call joint powers authorities, which is multiple jurisdictions working together in Minnesota and Wisconsin and a number of other of the Midwestern states, actually in Washington State too. So cities can choose to bind themselves together in sort of an interlocal kind of agreement around this. It gets a little bit more involved from a negotiating perspective, but it's doable, okay? So that answers your question. Yes, it's doable. Yes, it's a little bit, it can be tricky, but it is definitely doable. All right. So kind of moving on, customer service. The federal customer service standards, which are part of your current franchise right now, haven't been updated in probably 30 years. So what that means is, you know what an interactive voice response system is, where you call up and it says, catch chick 4, it's da-da-da-da, and maybe you'll get your... The federal customer service standards don't even deal with that. All right, so one of the things with regard to customer service that I see people looking at, if it's an issue in the community, is simply to come up with some kind of more up-to-date customer service standards that the cable operator has to comply with. Now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. A lot of cities have done this elsewhere. You can just borrow, your consultant can borrow those, go, that looks pretty good, and sit down and figure something out that's going to work. So again, remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel on some of these things like this one because it's already been done. Just to improve things above what's in the current franchise agreement right now, which is the ancient federal standards. Ensuring support for MCAT for your community access channels and for local community uses. That's another thing. Yes, I have whole kinds of hands. You want to go there? Yeah.
Just on the customer service, how do you enforce that if they're not following on their end of the...
Well, what you do when you do your build customer service standards, I just worked with about 14 cities in the Minneapolis-St. Paul suburbs. to come up with a set of customer service standards. But they also have the enforcement and how they're enforced is built into the standards and into the franchise. Okay. Now you can have some sort of self-enforcement process built into it, but at the end of the day, and I don't know, I have no idea whether there's been customer service problems here or not. Okay, but in some of the places where I've done this, I've done all my public input, and I found there were customer service problems. Okay, so what we did then was figure out ways of escalating, I guess fines you might call them. But the city's then got to have somebody who's watching over it for a while. What I find is you kind of have to watch over it for 2 or 3 years, be the tough guy, get them to do it right. And once you get them to doing it right, then they're more likely to continue to do it right. But if you don't enforce from the get-go, they're just going to keep kind of backsliding on you. And I mean, this is not need to be derogatory at all. It's just sort of what I've observed, okay?
Since this is being recorded, I thought about this on the way over. There's 2 models that I wanted to bring up for. I don't see that they're incorporated now, so I wanted to bring these up for consideration for inclusion. I believe it was in eastern Montana that Verizon got in trouble because of the lack of good phone coverage, and they basically got put under essentially a report card process. A report card process similar to what we now see for the airlines, where they have to track and they have to provide to the public and then answer for addressing on-time arrivals and departures or lack thereof. But we don't really have anything. Yesterday Yahoo Mail was out pretty much all day, and so I would go to the web and I would say, is it down for me? Well, of course, I could see where everybody in the Pacific Northwest was a big hot cluster of none of us can get into our Yahoo email.
Yeah.
And it would be nice, I know there's times when we work with the cable company where we say it's not working, but there's nothing where they have to say, we admit it's not working. And we admit it didn't work for a day and a half. We admit everything you thought you recorded last night and you're paying for that privilege failed. And then we don't get any credits or money back for the fact that we paid them for a service that has failed a number of times that month.
I would strongly suggest that if you're interested in this, you go online and you look at the City of Seattle's customer service standards, which are built around that exact model, okay? And you can take them and you can tweak them and you can fine-tune them and make them fit for this community. But they spent a lot of time and effort developing, and they have, I mean, you get a month's free service for certain kind, I mean, there's a whole 2 or 3 pages of just what happens if certain things happen, here's what the customer gets. So that's one of the, there are other examples, but that's kind of a Northwestern one that kind of just jumped out of my mouth, okay? that seemed to be something, a good example to look at. Don't think I missed any other hands.
Sorry, I just want to confirm what I think I heard, which is you can enforce that sort of customer level response just through the franchise agreement. There doesn't have to be any municipal code written to require like the provider to credit a customer who receives poor service.
Okay. I've seen it done 2 different ways, okay? In some communities, particularly communities who have multiple cable operators, they'll put it in the city code, because then it applies to all companies, all cable provider, video service and cable providers equally. When you've only got one company, okay, and likely are only going to have one company, then you put it in the franchise. You could still put it in the code if you wanted to. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that, okay? It's just how you want to handle it. It's really a matter of preference. But in places, for sure, when you have multiple operators, you really do want to put it in the code, because then you're treating everybody the same. And that's really important. Okay, kind of zipping on. Assuring support for MCAT, for PAIC and community channels and the local community uses of the cable system. This has to do with the channels. Right now I know that there is equipment at City Hall, there's equipment at the county, there's equipment at one of the high schools. One of the things that's very important is to recognize what's in place right now, okay? Do you want to continue it? And figuring out what it's going to take to continue it. So all of that funding and resources associated with that, these are things that you can negotiate in a renewal franchise if through the public input process people would like to see this happen, okay? Yeah?
Can we negotiate a broadcast public access without having cable? Like large...
Okay. Well, it would be You wouldn't require charter to do that. What you would do is, many places already put the access programming all online. I mean, they do it here, okay? So that's really not a requirement of the operator. That's a functionality in a service. One of the things that, and this is my next slide, and let me just zero in on it. This concept of it, and I know you guys are going down this direction right now, of a community media and a community media resource center, okay? The concept is that we're not talking about access TV anymore. We're talking about all of the ways that people in the community want to use media. The training they need or don't need to do it, the ways to distribute the content on multiple platforms, internet, YouTube, you name it, the cable system, etc. One of the things that Joel and I have been talking about, and it makes me absolutely bonkers right now here, is that there's all these sports events going on, but they can't get them on the channel. They only can do them online. It like boggles my mind, okay? And it's a technical problem. It has to do with two-way connectivity. It has to do with equipment access. But right now, but that's what I'm talking about, is being able to take that community content and make it broadly available, okay? And that's not really something you require the operator to do. But you want to have the resources to get the signal back from multiple locations to the community media center now and to the new location at the library, all right? And to be able to take that signal and send it back up to the head end, out to subscribers, or put it out online. Okay, so yeah, you can do that, but it's just not requiring the operator to do it. Sorry, I got on a rant on that one, but it's just a button of mine. So it really is thinking about how dramatically our uses of media have changed since 2003. And frankly, how dramatically they're probably going to change by the time this franchise expires. And I know my crystal ball isn't that good of knowing what's going to be like in 2028, but thinking about what needs to be done to assure quality service, both signal quality, customer service on the quality side, and community service on the community resources side, and making sure that if these are things you're concerned about, that you go to the franchising and renewal process with those sorts of things in mind. And so this community media center's approach is something that is just, it's blossoming all over the country. I mean, let me give you an example. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is not a place you think of as the hotbed of high tech and whatever, okay? And 15 years ago, the community media center there they started 30 years ago. They basically now have, they did a partnership with the library, all right? They raised money through a partnership with a local entrepreneur. They raised money to renovate the upstairs of an old Carnegie Stout library in a very low-income neighborhood in Grand Rapids. And the library is on the first floor. The media center's on the second floor, okay? They had the opportunity to, the high school had a radio station, full power FM radio station. It's going to turn the license back to the FCC. The executive director of the Access Center goes, over here, okay? They applied, the license was moved to them, and they have a full power FM radio station that the community media center runs. See how we're going community media center? They provide IT services to nonprofits in the community. Okay, they had a chance to do another entrepreneurial opportunity in a low-income neighborhood and acquire an old theater, raise the money to renovate it, and it was a classic old neighborhood theater kind of thing. They now operate the theater. They have their sort of a branch at this theater of the media center. So all kinds of community organizations and arts groups have a meeting space there. They have a performance space there, and they generate revenue by bands and stuff who want to use that. So my point is, it really is a community media resource with a great big giant tent over the top of it. And so this concept is not a new 2017-18 concept. It's been percolating in different places around the country for a long time. You guys are on that path with the partnership with the library right now, okay? And I think this franchise renewal process can contribute to taking you farther down that road. based on what I've started to learn already about what's happening here. So I wanted to point that out because it really is something that if you haven't connected the dots on it, you should. Real quickly, here the process, your green sheet, okay? Here's the process, 36 months, 30 months, cable company says, I want my franchise renewed. You then do a performance review of the operator, community needs assessment. You then determine what you're going to negotiate for. You start usually a formal and an informal process at the same time. That means you issue an RFP, and at the same time you sit down with the cable company and start talking with them. You know, say, hey, here are our key issues. Here are the things we'd like to see in the franchise, but you have the RFP out there at the same time. Okay. And out the other end of that, either you're going to get to yes through an informal negotiation, or you're going to get to yes through the issuance of an RFP. And if you don't get the yes through the issuance of an RFP, then there's a very complicated legal process, which is on the back, is on the number 9, 10, 11, and 12 on your sheet. I'm not going to go into it unless people have answers, have questions about it, because I don't see that happening here. But there is a formal process laid out to deal with if the parties can't reach yes. Okay. And so what I want to give you a sense of is when you do a past performance review, the work that we're doing is primarily focused on looking to the future, needs assessment, okay? However, it's really important to determine if the company has actually complied with the current franchise agreement. And if you look at item number 9 on your green sheet, there are only a couple reasons, a few reasons why you can tell the company, no, we will not renew your franchise. And one of them is if the company has not substantially complied with the terms and conditions of the existing contract agreement. But in order to know that, you have to do a compliance audit to know that, okay? And this is where I find a lot of communities fall down. They just don't look at their existing franchise. And you know, as a person who does this for a living, I can look at a franchise, spend an hour with it, and go, okay, circle this, circle this, circle this, circle this. These are the things you need to look for. That's where you're most likely to find if there is a non-compliance. Okay, but it is something that the city, I know, is talking about doing, and also looking at doing a review of that franchise fee, that 5% that the company is supposed to be paying. Has there, you know, and I know you guys did an audit a number of years ago and you found that, in fact, there was some underpayment. So the key is, has there been underpayment since 2010, I think, if I'm remembering right, okay? That's another thing to think about, but this is part of the formal the process I'm talking about. I'm just sort of laying this out so you get a handle on it. Then the next piece is a lot of what I will be doing in assisting the city and MCAT with, and that is the public input process or the community needs assessment process. And what we're going to do, if you go to the green sheet in your kit, this is actually our work plan for the needs assessment process. Not the, yeah, okay. And I want to point this out only because I want you to see we have a very logical, kind of organized approach to what we're doing and what our estimated timelines are and so on and so forth. So we're going to do 4 community focus group meetings, and this flyer is the first sort of unveiling of those focus group meetings. This is the dates, the times are all going to happen here in the library. This is where you guys can really be helpful, all right? As I sometimes rather indelicately say, I want a lot of butts in chairs, okay? I want a lot of people to come and tell us what they think, all right? And this is not, this focus group is not like a bitch session. It's designed, we sort of frame a little bit, and then I have 4 or 5 questions that we brainstorm. What are the big issues facing Missoula in the next 5 years or so? And it doesn't have to have anything to do with cable, okay? What are the things that makes it difficult for you as an organizational leader or whatever to communicate information to your constituents or get information back from them? And what are the communications barriers? And we go on for 4 questions that basically provide an underpinning of understanding about what are the issues in the community, what are the communications barriers, what would make it easier for people in the community to just do what they want to do, get information out, educate people about breast cancer, educate kids about issues. I mean, you name it, okay? Everybody in this room is a leader with some interest area or constituency, or it's part of their job. All right? We want all of you to bring all your friends and neighbors to come to these focus groups. And there's also going to be an online survey. The day we open the first focus group, we'll also open the door on an online survey, okay? And people will be able to provide information. Now, what's interesting here is I get very different information from the focus groups than I did in the online survey, which is why you do both of them, okay? You got to do them both, all right? The third thing we're going to be doing is evaluating the current equipment and resources and services that are available for access in community programming right now. So we're going to go around to the city hall, to the county building, take pictures. We're going to, Joel is, he's already wanting to shoot me because I made him fill out all these forms and inventory forms and all this information. We're going, well, why do you care about what's already in place? Because I need to know what's here now and how much it's being used. And then I take a look at what comes in from the focus groups in the online survey, and then I go, okay, what's missing now? What's missing now? Let alone what's missing 3 years from now, or 6 years from now, or 10 years from now. So what we'll do in the final report is we will provide, assuming it's a 10-year franchise, a 10-year spreadsheet for equipment replacement, okay? Line items. All right, so that when you go into the negotiations as a city, you're not kind of pulling numbers out of your ears, so to speak. You actually have something that's grounded in the reality of what's in place now and what's needed for the future. And if any of you have done negotiations before, you know the importance of providing that legal foundation for what you're going to ask for. So, and the fourth, 1, 2, 3, the fourth, fifth, whatever thing we would probably have you do is do a public hearing. Okay, and this is your classic public hearing. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll get a transcript of that hearing and we'll go through it and we'll take a look at what's here that we haven't heard before, what reinforces what came in from the focus groups and so forth. And all of that then comes together into the needs assessment, which is typically 2 documents. It's the main body of the report and then appendices, which is a lot of the surveys, so the results, the forms that Joel's filling out with all the equipment information, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the product that then the city has as a tool to go into the negotiation process. So let me stop there and see any questions, because we're kind of rounding the pike here and we're just about ready to finish up, but I want to give you the final kind of real key thing. Yeah.
In your experience, have any cut-to-court campaigns substantially reduced operator revenue to the point that they have some fallback or parachute positions that if revenue doesn't stay like this, certain things that were negotiated in the contract drop off too?
I can't say that I have actually seen it, okay, or participated in a process that did that. I have heard that that has been in place, but it's pretty darn rare, okay? Because the bottom line here is the revenue is like, because there's 3 big pipes going into the company's billfold, okay? It's not just about one pipe. And they gotta have that coaxial cable and that fiber in the right-of-way in order to provide all 3 of those services. So I think I fairly answered your question. Yeah, I think it probably has. I've heard about it. I haven't actually seen franchises has it written that way, but it could be, you know. Other questions? Yeah, back here.
How much of MCAT's operating budget depends upon the franchise renewal? 100% or?
Quite a great deal of it.
Okay.
A great deal of it.
Yeah.
Which is why the social entrepreneurship stuff that I talked to you about with the Grand Rapids Project is we're seeing people realizing that they have to approach things in a way that recognizes that they can't have their primary source of revenue always being the cable franchise, that it's good that it's there, but so that social entrepreneurship kind of piece comes into play, and not everybody's doing that. Personally, I think it's a smart move, but that's just my personal opinion. Yeah?
Have any other communities successfully included a request for downtown wireless infrastructure to be set up as a benefit of the cable franchise? That's something we need.
I haven't seen it in a franchise, no. I have seen it in situations, there's a couple of places that one I'm working right now actually, where the city had the franchise agreement and then they had like a number of other agreements with the cable operator for internet service and for telephone service. And what they ended up doing was in those other agreements, they sort of did renewals on those at the same time they did the cable part. So, but I haven't actually seen it in franchises, no. Yes, ma'am.
Well, because you mentioned in the very beginning how this sort of crosses the line between city and county, and we sort of got this by default when we lost the Bresnan. One of the things Montana allows for is what's called special purpose districts, and that doesn't mean they have taxing authority. It just means that everybody in the district is considered to be a member, and able to have the input with the voting right to the board, and then the board becomes more of an umbrella contact so that the city and the county commissioners are not always trying to figure out who's doing what and who's a few steps ahead of us and who didn't get included in the last negotiation and who did. Have you worked, and I know there are other states that do that as well, certainly North Dakota, for example. Have you worked with special purpose districts? They used to be called TV districts most frequently, and it was to bring in rural telephone and television. But now we can have communication districts. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, I'm actually very familiar with a lot of different kinds of special districts. Okay, sewer, water, garbage, you name it. Okay, so I mean, I'm pretty darn familiar with that structure. I've seen it in a lot of places around the
Is
country.
there a good application for a consideration like that, especially in a combined city, county, rural expansion location?
The problem is this, that the franchise agreement, which is the legal and binding agreement, has to be between the cable operator and the jurisdiction that has the legal authority to give access to the right-of-way. So the county could be partnered with the city in an interlocal agreement, okay? But it couldn't be a special, from my knowledge, it couldn't be just, I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all, a special district. Because it is a right-of-way agreement, it's a rent for the use of the right-of-way agreement, they really would have to have a franchise. If they wanted the cable company to do the same thing. I mean, one place I worked, and I'll just say in Monterey City in Monterey County, California, I was working with the city, the county had hired, this is years ago, a different company. The county wasn't that interested in community programming. The city was very interested in community programming. The city did an elaborate performance review, needs assessment. The county didn't do anything. And what happened is that, and it ended up the county just said, me too. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying I've seen in my work in Minnesota, I worked with one of 6 jurisdictions, another was 10 jurisdictions that were bound together in joint powers agreements, okay? In Washington State, I just did one that there wasn't even a joint powers agreement. It was just the city, 2 cities that had this is Pasco and Richland, Washington, had just said, we're going to work together in this process. We're going to jointly hire a consultant. We're going to file, and we're going to work together. It wasn't a formal intergovernmental agreement. It was a letter of cooperation, I guess you might call it. In Montana, there might be another terminology for it. And so what we did there was we did the negotiations, but it was representing both jurisdictions with this, I guess you'd call it an interlocal agreement, but it was a little different than joint powers authority, let's just put it that way. So there's different ways people could work together. The key here is the given that I just have to, again, emphasize that. It can work, but people have to decide they want to do it, they have to be committed to do it, and they got to recognize that there's going to be times when one party wants something different than the other party, and they got to be, and however you work that out, okay? But my point simply is that it can work very successfully. You just, the parties have to have complete agreement with each other, that's all. So, kind of wandering down this list of things to do as we kind of end up this afternoon. We've looked at the work plan and timeline. As you can see, we've got the focus groups aimed at April 3rd and 4th. And then from April 3rd to May 30th, we'll keep the online survey open, okay? And then after that, the online survey closes, and then we go ahead and we crank out the report. We will be working on the report, parts of the report, when the online survey is open, because we can do all the write-up of the focus groups and all that analysis while that's going on. The real key here is to help people become aware of, number 1, what's happening, and number 2, why their input is so important. Okay. I aim for, I would like to see like 4 focus groups. We're having 4 focus groups with at least 30 people in each one. Okay, so that's 120 people. That shouldn't be that hard. And I want it to be a real diverse, and by the way, I want it to be a real diverse group. I mean, I just don't want all the usual suspects, if you forgive me, okay? I really want all the usual suspects plus their usual suspects, and I want a big tent, okay? Because that's better for the city and for MCAT, is to have a real diverse group of folks who are providing input. Yeah?
Sorry, I just, looking at these and understanding that the ideas for both butts and seats, the K-12 schools and universities that's scheduled from 3 to 5 on a Wednesday, teachers can't go to that.
Well, the key here is come to whichever one you want to. Okay, and if whatever your interest is or whatever works for your schedule, and that's a really important thing. I think we said that there. So, look at the time, look at the interest, just show up. Okay. I have to, when I'm leading the focus groups, I have to, for methodology perspective, I have to do them exactly the same. I ask the same questions, because the nature of the questions are, it doesn't matter what constituency you're from, you're going to have an answer that reflects you, but it's a broadly enough structured question to get where we need to go, okay? So, come when you can, come if it matches your interest area, but just come, okay? Other things, so take this information, already up on the MCAT website. You can go, you can click in, and you can RSVP right now for a focus group. And by the way, there are going to be prizes. Joel is getting really, really good prizes for people. And we're going to have drawing for each of the focus groups and for the online survey. And it's really good stuff, all right? So sometimes, I mean, some of the places I've done focus groups, and we're going to promote what those prizes are. People go, I just want to go in there. I mean, there's 3 people in the room, and I get a drawing for this like $50 gift certificate from this restaurant. Cool, I'll spend a couple hours doing that. I might get a $50 gift certificate from the Target or from a restaurant or whatever. So that's why we use these little incentives to help people to get a little desire, help them to show up. So please put this stuff on your website. Direct them to the website. We want to get it on the city website as well. Okay. We're maintaining the RSVPs, and we'll make sure that as things get closer and closer, we give a report back to the city and to Joel and to MCAT about who's RSVP'd so far, so if the usual suspects aren't there, they get called. Okay. And it can't just be MCAT that's promoting this thing. I mean, it really has to be all of you in this room who have constituents who care about government transparency or youth or arts, environmental issues, street cleaning, emergency alert, fire safety. All of these things are things that certain people have interest in, or multiples of those things. We need you to let people know that these meetings are happening and that they can participate. So we send you away with this. I know there's going to be emails and e-blasts that you're going to get, but if you can put some of this information out right now, you can put this little flyer up on a bulletin board sometime, right now, and we're going to be making lots more of those. I think, Joel, Derek, what have I missed? Yes.
Did you say the prizes are really good for the folks?
He was just trying to tell me what some of them were this afternoon, so.
Yeah. I think you did it, Sue. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And if you have questions, just grab me, and I'll try and answer them for you.
Yeah. And thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.